What's up, everybody? This is Theo, and this is Mitsuki from Theo's Pets. My mom's here, and it reminded me of an interesting story about an iguana. But I want to talk about some things first, and then the story's going to kind of prove my point. So let's get into it, shall we? So, what I want to talk about today is buying reptiles for your small children. So, that's an interesting subject and concept for, I guess, a few reasons. Because, I mean, it's my love for reptiles started at a young age. I had reptiles at a young age, and we'll actually get into that. That's part of what started this whole conversation. I mean, I remember going to at the state park those reptile shows with the school and all of that, and they're just cool things. And I mean, as a kid, they just either terrify you or they capture your imagination, or both, honestly. And so, but when getting reptiles, I feel like most people don't quite understand what they're getting into. So for starters, when you get a reptile for a child, I mean, realistically, you as the adult end up doing most of the care. I mean, could you imagine a 6 or 7-year-old trying to dangle a dead rat that they've heated up to the proper temperature and water in front of this snake, and hoping that it hits the mouse and not their hand, and not just running away screaming, So, I mean, you're definitely going to be feeding it. This thing poops like a Labrador retriever, and it stinks. So I give it once or twice before, the kid totally gives up on that. So, I mean, you're going to end up feeding it and taking care of it. So whatever reptile you do end up getting for your child, just realize that this is something you need to not really be scared of or scared to handle yourself, because most of the time you're going to be the one that ends up doing it. The other thing I feel is that most people don't do their adequate research. With parents, it's a weird limbo they find themselves in, where if they don't do their own research, they trust their kid to have done research. And I mean, maybe the kid did do research, but there's so much information on the internet, and not all of it is correct. And what I have noticed about the reptile trade is most of the time the information you find is not what's correct or what's best for the snake, but it's honestly what's best for your wallet. And that's not always what's best for your buddies here. And so, I mean, sometimes I feel like these adults, they buy these animals for their kids, and they bite off more than they can chew. I mean, the boa constrictor here, I mean, I'm lucky with Mitts. He's small for an adult. He can live in the 4x2x2 no problem. But I mean, some boas need like a 6 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot cage. I mean, like, that's crazy to accommodate. Not to mention, like, feeding them. They can be crazy intimidating if you're not horribly comfortable with snakes and whatnot and understand their body language. I mean, boas can strike from any angle. They don't have to do that S curve, So I mean, like, that's intimidating in itself if you're not completely comfortable and the snake's not comfortable with you. But I mean, like, I'm going to use bearded dragons as an example, because I feel like that's the one that you see the most of. Now, I should preface this that I do have a bearded dragon, an adult bearded dragon, living in a 40-gallon enclosure. However, she, and this is why we got her back legs do not work. They kind of wiggle a little bit. She can't really move on them. She kind of drags them around. So she doesn't really move much anyway. I mean, she has her little nest over there. She's good. My other bearded dragon, on the other hand, is also in a 4x2x2 foot enclosure. So think about that for a minute. I have a bearded dragon, a lizard, that most people buy for like their 12-year-old pets, in the same size enclosure that I'm keeping all of this snake. Because that bearded dragon needs room to explore and move and climb They like to dig. They are extremely active and inquisitive. They need a lot of stimulation. They need heat gradients and variables, like, but PetSmart will tell you, keep it in a 40-gallon enclosure. And that's the other thing I was going to get into is, so your kid does some research, you'll go to the pet store, you get a ball python or the bearded dragon or whatever. The kid says a few things, whatever. People at PetSmart, most of them are educated in maybe whatever animal they personally have, but not all the animals going in and out of there, that's for sure. And they're also trying to make a sale. So I mean, a lot of the time they'll tell you, you can keep a bearded dragon in a 40-gallon. Sometimes I've heard they've told people they can keep them in a 20-gallon enclosure for their entire life. I have a 20-gallon sitting right here, and it's almost the size of one of the bearded dragons, tip of tail to nose. I mean, a little bit bigger. They could probably still turn around in there, but I mean, it's a little bonkers to me, And so the kid gets super excited. They want this ball python or this bearded dragon or this whatever it is that they decided they wanted, that they saw and thought was super cool. And you go and get it. They do their research. They pick out a critter keeper, a water dish, a half log hide, and they get a ball python, and that's what we're doing. And so then you quickly find out that that's not right, because the snake or the lizard or whatever gets sick, or it doesn't eat, or you can definitely tell something's up and wrong. Then you do more research, and now you're in it. You already have it. You're buying a $200 enclosure, if not bigger. I mean, some of these 4x2x2s, I mean, I just paid like $600. Like, what is? Well, I also got the heating panel installed and paid for good shipping and stuff. But I mean, $500-600 for a 4x2x2 PVC enclosure is honestly about par, realistically, with the add-ons and whatnot, And so with all of that being said, I mean, you're there already, and you were not aware of this stepping into it. But that also leads to another point, is these things growing and getting bigger. So a lot of these reptiles, man, they have 10, 20, sometimes even 30-year lifespans. So not only are you taking care of this thing when your kid is a kid and can't handle it, you're taking care of it when your kid goes off to college. I mean, it's a lifelong commitment. These reptiles live a long time, and so your 12-year-old, when they go off to college at 18 or 19, that's what, 6-7 years. So you still have a decade, maybe 2 decades with this snake or this lizard or this turtle or whatever it is you got them when they were a kid. And so now, like, this is your pet. And so, I mean, I have a lot of reptiles. My child comes and plays with the reptiles, but I'm fully aware of the fact that all of these are my reptiles and I'm responsible for all of these reptiles. The other thing with that is, with children, with reptiles, I mean, and I suggest it with dogs too, maybe not as much cats, but especially medium to larger sized dogs, you have to watch them when they handle them. I mean, with the reptiles, you're honestly more realistically worried about the child harming the reptile. But I mean, like Mitts here, the 6-foot boa, I mean, if he tagged my 2-year-old in cold water, that's a traumatic experience for that child. Now, Mitts is great with the baby, and they love each other. I mean, actually, all my snakes are good with the baby. My baby touches all the reptiles while I'm there. I'm holding them. She touches their tails in this hand while I have their head in this hand. Whatever, it's copacetic. But the thing is, you get your kid a bearded dragon, you have to watch him hold it, because they can bite, and the bites can hurt. But I mean, realistically, like bearded dragons, the way their bodies are set up and designed, you can't turn them on their backs or they can't breathe. You can't grab the bearded dragon and hold it like you would a puppy up like this, or flip it over on his back like you could kill it. So not only are you worried about the child getting hurt, but you're also worried about the child hurting the reptile, because some of these are small and fragile, and you have to be very careful with how they move, and you have to be aware of it. You know what I mean? And so it's a lot of time and effort on your part to take care of these animals, because these are more than likely, once I said, going to be your pet, unless you just have a super responsible, dedicated, like 12 to 13-year-old that knows what they're getting into, and like they want this thing for the rest of their life. You know what I mean? Because most kids I know, like after a year or two get bored of anything, but like when it comes to like cleaning poop and feeding and all that stuff, I mean, give it 3 months and they're about over it, So keep all of that in mind when you're buying your kids reptiles. And so a story to sum all of that up and kind of prove my point is, when I was probably about 9. So now, I was born in 1990, so this was before the internet was like prevalent and a thing in most households, for starters. So like back then, the information you got on pets was crazy and sporadic. You could get a book from the library, or you'd really just trusted whatever they told you at the pet store or wherever you got your animal. And the reason I say that is this. I lived in North Carolina, just south of Raleigh. We had come to Myrtle Beach. And so in North Carolina, I don't know about now because I don't live there anymore, but at the time, it was not illegal to own turtles or iguanas, but it was illegal to buy or sell turtles or iguanas, okay? Is how that worked. So we went on vacation in Myrtle Beach, and right across the straight lines, there was this big like discount beach store, gas station, souvenir thing. And they had, first off, and once again at 9, you don't know any better, they had iguanas for sale, but they were in like a pop-up grow tent. It was like a 20-gallon grow tent with like, I mean, I'm not gonna exaggerate, but like legitimately like 30 iguanas. And I mean, it was crazy the amount of iguanas in this thing. And they were selling for like $9. So I really wanted one. We get one. So the guy gives it to us in a critter keeper, but tells us we need to go to PetSmart and get something bigger. So we get the iguana. We go and we get either a 10 or a 20-gallon tank, a heat rock, which never ever do heat rocks. I mean, I could do a whole video about things you shouldn't do, but I mean, with the heat rock, like A, the power cord is inside the enclosure, but B, I mean, like, I guess you could plug it up to a thermostat maybe and run the probe to it, but then you're running all those cables through the enclosure. But I mean, it just seems like a fire risk or a burn hazard to your animal with them directly on the unit that's conducting electricity to like regulate heat. That just doesn't sound good anyway. And they go on a heat rock in this little tank. And so we didn't know too much about them. I don't even remember what we fed this thing. Probably not bugs. I don't know, to be honest with you. But anyway, so we've had it maybe 2 weeks. So we have it on the floor in the hallway by the wall. And the reason that's relevant is this. When I was a child, I had, yeah, you licking me? Sorry, I had a bad habit of sleepwalking, just stress, night terrors, all that stuff. I've kind of gotten better, but that's a whole other story. Anyway, and so I guess in the middle of my sleep, I decided I was gonna go play with this iguana. I wanted to go play with my iguana. So I got up, slept walk across the house, went, opened the tank, got the iguana out. And this is how this all transpired. I grab the iguana drops its tail, okay, and bites me, which wakes me up. So I begin to scream because I've just been bitten, I'm in pain, and I don't know what is happening, and there's something wiggling in my hand. So I still have the tail in my hands. The iguana is hightailed it throughout the house. My mom is coming running throughout the house, and I'm sitting there holding the tail, freaking out because I don't understand that nerve endings and stuff. I don't know if any of you have ever popped an iguana's tail off or similar, but I mean, the nerve endings and stuff are still active, and so the tail actually is still to sit there and wiggle, and sometimes even respond to stimulus for like hours. It's cool, it's nuts. Little old me was not as scientifically knowledgeable as I am now. Lost it. Between the waking up from the sleepwalking, being bitten, and holding this moving tail, man, I was just beside myself. Which honestly I feel like for most people wouldn't have been enough to ruin reptiles for them, and it really didn't. I didn't get lizards for a while. I ended up getting tortoises, which turned into another situation like this, because my parents love them to death. They wouldn't tell me no, but I didn't do any research. They didn't do any research, and the information we received was very wrong. Well, the iguana, which had ran, we ended up finding it like 2 weeks later. It had ran up the chimney and was living in the chimney, and it fell out. Just one day, just fell out covered in soot, and it died a couple of days later, unfortunately. You know, but I don't, honestly, with how I remember us taking care of it, it probably wouldn't have lasted that long anyway. And that's nothing on my parents or me, especially at that point in time, because like I said, this was in the 90s. This was before smartphones. I mean, like, this was even really before flip phones. I mean, you didn't really have computers in your house. You had dial-up if you did. You didn't have wireless internet access. I mean, so you either had to go to the library and read books, and even those books, those information are sometimes wrong. I mean, now especially, they're wrong and outdated, but at the time was still wrong and outdated. Or you know, you got your information from the pet store about the animal and they were just completely wrong. Or it's just, I don't know, I feel like reptiles might not be a child's pet. It's cool for kids to learn them and handle them and enjoy them. Like I said, my kid comes in and plays with the reptiles all the time. Comes in here, sits on the floor, plays on her tablet while I work at my desk here, just watches the animals. I mean, you know, but would I buy her a ball python at 9 or 11, put it in a tank and stick it in her room, especially without doing the research myself or double checking behind her? Absolutely 100% not. Would I buy my 9-year-old, 12-year-old, whatever, something that I'm scared personally as the parent to handle? Like, if you're scared to touch or feed a snake, don't buy your kid a snake, because realistically that's probably going to be your snake. And then, I mean, just remember, it's a commitment, 10 to 30 years. I mean, that sounds like a prison sentence, you know. Your kids leave home faster than this thing will die on you, you know. And not that I'm complaining, because I love Mitts. He's my buddy, and I can do this every day, and I do. It's actually like my Zen meditation is coming in here first thing in the morning when the whole house is asleep, and cleaning and handling and seeing what needs to be done and all of that stuff, and playing with the animals, you know. It's just, it's relaxing. It's meditation for me, but it can be overwhelming for some people, you know. And so you just need to be aware of all of that going into. The biggest thing is just doing your research, especially in this day and age when there's so much just easy access to information. You got to do your research. The other thing on that though is, with there being so much information, it can be overwhelming sometimes trying to figure out what's right, what's wrong, with so many contradicting opinions and information and people throwing stuff at you. But I mean, realistically, like doing rescue and rehab, I've learned that different things work for different animals of the same species. My corn snakes, I feed them, house them, and decorate their cages entirely differently based on the individual snake. I've got one that, so it's a weird thing about corn snakes if they're semi-arboreal or not. I have one that you almost always find him up in the trees, so I give him a lot of climbing stuff. The other two are completely arboreal. One, it's like a basilisk. He has layers, but he's got some neurological problems and some eyesight problems from who we got him from. And then I have a fire morph who is super skittish and is weird about eating. So, but we got all of that handled. So I mean, just do your research, do your information. You got to figure out which works for your animal, but that can be overwhelming for a child too, to try to figure out, why is my ball python not eating? You know, all in all, what I'm trying to get at is reptiles are awesome, and learning about them, handling them, and experiencing them for kids is amazing. It can even be life-changing. However, getting one and caring for it and everything that goes into it, because they're not as easy as a hamster or a bird. They do eat live things, or things that used to be alive you have to freeze. You do have to change out their substrate. You have to learn their different body languages and whatnot. You have to handle them differently. It can turn into a negative experience pretty quickly if you or the child aren't prepared for everything that's entailed with keeping reptiles. And once again, by the end of it, it's probably not going to be your child's snake much longer. Eventually it's going to be yours. So if you're considering getting your child a reptile, just pick one you like and would enjoy yourself. Ain't that right, Mitts? Well, that's just some food for thought. This is Theo, and this is Mitts, and we're going to wish you guys a good day.